Mark Watts, Elitefts.com. I'm here on the campus of Urbana University, and this is part of our Sports Performance Coach Education Series. This week, I'm going to talk about a subject that I went over at one of the NSCA coaches conferences, and that's developing a relationship between the sport coaches, which can actually play into and be similar to those same relationships that you would have with administrators or parents too, if you're in that private facility. So hopefully this presentation will give you a couple ideas on some different ways to think about how you interact with some of those other professionals that are involved in the development of athletes. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this was there's some stresses that happen with strength and conditioning and sports performance. And I know that in the past we've talked a little bit about some of those different factors that happen. Really when you're looking at the job security aspect of the profession, it really is there's a lot more coaches than there are coaching jobs. We've already talked about that. But when you're really about why it's important to develop that relationship with that sport coach, it really is, to me, talking with some of the roundtables with the Young Strength Coaches Corner have done in the past at the CSCCA and NSCA conferences, that really is, besides the job security and being away from family and moving family across the country and those just the nature of the profession, the other factor that really puts a lot of stress on coaches was that relationship with the sport coach. There are some nightmare stories about some of these sport coaches are very difficult to work with. Some are in a situation where it's great, and I think it's one of those things where it really happens is a lot of times the Olympic sport coaches. Football and basketball, a lot of times they bring in their own guys who subsequently bring in their own guys or women. With the Olympic coaches, a lot of times you inherit teams, and sometimes the sport coach doesn't get to pick you. The director of strength and conditioning picks you, and so it's really crucial to develop that relationship. So it is a huge stressor. Think about it as a strength and conditioning coach. When you get a new coach in the department, the amount of work that you have to do to get that, build that relationship and get it a working environment that is conducive to athlete success, there's a lot of stress with that. And again, from a professional development standpoint, remember that a lot of your, the recommendations you're going to get are going to be from sport coaches. And sometimes that's the first person people call. They might not call your director of strength and conditioning. They may call the sport coach that you work with those teams. So it's really important that we try to develop those relationships. So hopefully this presentation will help you with that. All right, so let's talk about a couple things with understanding the sport coach. And this is something that a lot of times young strength coaches don't really understand. Number one is they have more invested than you when it comes to their team. They might have spent close to a year, even longer, recruiting those young men and women, spending time, either them or their assistants, on the phone with these young men and women, corresponding with them via email, social media, texting, whatever they're allowed to do, home visits, having the kid on campus. They've put a lot of time into this individual, and when they get on campus and the first time you see them, they don't know how to squat, and your first assumption is that they're a turd. That's hard for that sport coach to take, because that young man or young woman they brought them in because they feel like they can help the program. And so you have to understand is that you don't have as much invested in that young man or woman as a sport coach does. So that's one thing that'll help your relationship with that. They're protective of their teams. Again, when it comes to working them out too hard or not working them hard enough, they are protective of the young men and women because, again, it goes back to that investment piece. They might not trust you. I talked about this in a couple different blog posts that I have, is, again, one of the biggest mistakes that we make as strength coaches is when we come to a sport coach and say, I can help your kids get better because I know this. What you're doing is not good enough. What you're doing isn't helping them. And all of a sudden, these sport coaches get offended. This happens a lot in the private sector. And one thing to understand is that they don't know you. They've never seen you coach. They don't know if you have the best interest of the athlete at hand. Remember, a sport coach's perception of a strength and conditioning coach is highly dependent on one, their past experiences, and two, a lot of times social media or what they see in the media of what a strength coach should be. So they might have some bad experiences with strength coaches. They might not really see the value in them. And again, that goes to the last point, is that really, that's the toughest part about our profession, is that we're in a profession in sports performance where no one has really clearly been able to define what comprehensiveness and what really the value that we have, and how do we determine whether we're doing a good job or not. No one has really kind of determined this is objective proficiency as a strength coach. Are we basing it off injuries? Are we basing it off of performance in a weight room? Are we basing it off wins and losses? And everybody knows that those aren't very accurate to really determine the worth of a strength coach. Sport coaches are in the same boat where they have wins and losses next to their name. You as a strength coach don't. So all of a sudden now, they don't know what to do with you. They don't know whether you're a good strength coach or not. What frame of reference would they have? And even if they do have a frame of reference, it's not necessarily objective. So that's one thing to think about. All right, communication strategies. And we'll talk a little bit about a couple of these. Again, being proactive and having an initial meeting with the sport coach, I think, is important. And I think with that initial meeting, there's a couple things. First of all, ask questions. That's really a big thing that people just don't want to. They want to, as soon as they come into that meeting, they want to tell them about what they can do and what their program is. Strength coaches, this is one thing that'll help you out. As soon as you walk into that room with that sport coach, it's not your program. It's the program of that sport. It's the head coach's program. You are now an assistant. Like Joe Ken has told me a number of times, as a head strength coach, you are the head coach of the weight room. You're not the head coach of any sport. So that's one of those things that knowing that ahead of time really helps. Know the expectations of what is that sport coach looking for. What do they want out of you? A lot of times you might think that they either want you heavily involved. Sometimes they might know they just don't want that much impact from you or input from you. So it's important to understand what your role is and what the expectation of that sport coach is of you. They might not be determining your worth the same way you feel you should be, but if you know that ahead of time, that'll help. And then lastly, again, be an open book. You can't be that guy. Listen, you're not selling an ebook online. You're just telling them, listen, this is what we've done in the past. These are the issues, these are the problems, and this is what we want. This is what we feel we can do. So just be an open book, but at the same time, you're there to listen for expectations, and that'll help you, and that'll start the relationship off in the right frame of mind. Provide the coach your training program. That's one of those things that you've done in the past, and just understand is that it's really, again, goes back to the frame of reference. They might not have the same opinion or viewpoint of what a strength and conditioning program could be. So when they're looking at your program and they're going through your entire yearly plan, they might not know the difference of what's effective and what's not. They might not know the rationale of what's there and what's not, but at least you can provide them with, listen, this is what we did in the past. And again, and this sets it up for the next kind of phase that we'll talk about in a couple minutes about that relationship and how to really kind of come up with some solutions, some differences. Invite them to a training session, especially if they get on mid-year. Invite them to a training session of another team. And be careful, they might assume that this is going to be identical to what we do with your team. But at least we'll give them an idea. What they want to see, what will make the most impact on those coaches, is how you relate to the players, how the players relate to you, how you relate to your assistants, and how the players relate to your assistants. You're not impressing them with your post-activation potentiation training and that you're on block periodization and you're in your transmutations. They don't even know what that is. But what they do know is they know when a coach has an impact on a player. And that's what they're looking for. And that's why you want them to see how you interact with the athletes. And I think that'll help you in the long run. And again, get feedback. Coach, what did you like about the program? Coach, what would you do differently? Put your ego aside. Listen, your ego might be the first thing that'll get you to start substitute teaching somewhere because you're not able to get along with others. You got to understand is that you have to what you know is important. What you know, your personal beliefs and your principles, you have to stick with. But at the same time, be at least get your ego to the side at least long enough to understand what the coach wants. Okay. All right. So going through creating the culture. That's one thing that I think is really important that coaches really have to understand. And if you're the more defined your culture is, the easier it is for that sport coach to at least understand that you're someone that sticks with your principles. So if you're looking at, again, with the off season, and again, there's not really a need to justify anything. I used to hear that sometimes in the off season you need to really push that envelope a little bit. Sometimes you have to do some things to make sure that those athletes have that little bit of a shared suffering where they hate your guts after the workout, but they understand the worst thing you could do as a strength coach. This is a little bit of a side note. The worst thing you do as a strength coach is have the athletes leave your sessions, or at the end of the cycle they say, well, I don't know if we did enough. I don't know if coach pushed us hard enough, or we did enough. We worked hard enough to get better. And again, anytime they question that, that's when all of a sudden the trust starts to falter a little bit. So and again, so you really need to make sure that you're setting those athletes up for success and making sure they're going to be able to handle the rigors further on in the season. In season wise, listen, this is one of the biggest things that was a biggest frustration for me. I wish I would have handled it a little bit better, but I really learned a lot, and I got a lot of stories from a lot of coaches. Listen, with the in-season, you cannot get those athletes sore. Because, again, all it takes is one athlete to say, man, my hamstrings are sore, and all of a sudden, or my shot's off, or whatever. And next thing you know, that coach, whether he understands why or not, all he knows is one of his best players is not at the top of their game, and he blames you as a strength coach. So make sure that, again, do everything you can to get those athletes adapted to the stimulus that you're going to give them in the season. And then really, you have to be insanely adaptable. One of the things that, the benefits of that nonlinear periodization and be able to adapt on a day-to-day basis, again, you're going to get in a season and you're going to have athletes that come off of an insane conditioning session, or they're going to be an hour late or an hour early, or it rains, so they want to come in and lift on a day that, for the third day in a row. You have to be adaptable. That's what you're a professional. You're a coach. You have to be able to make adjustments on the fly, and that's really what separates some of the coaches from good to average. So, and again, the one thing too that I think the thing that coaches want to see more than anything, whether it's right or wrong, is competition between the athletes. I'm not advocating record boards. I'm not advocating that you have, two athletes wrestle over a stick or beat the crap out of each other. I'm not saying that, but athletes want to be able to be pushed, and coaches relate that to on the field or on the court success. So anytime you can have some kind of competition, whether it be anything from pull-ups to a tug-of-war to just anything, community service, if you can be the facilitator of that competition, that can, in the coach's mind, not saying it will or not, but in the coach's mind, he feels that will carry over. She feels that will carry over to the field or court. So again, that's one of the things, and you get some more buy-in. So moving on. So coaches' misconceptions. Again, there's a couple here. You've probably seen a lot more, but that's the good thing about these. Hopefully, people will be able to interact with them and kind of give us some input. So again, a lot of times, if I'm a coach for a female athlete, they have this misconception that the physiology from a training standpoint for males and females are so grossly different that things have to be totally different. And again, a women's basketball player can't train like a men's basketball player. And obviously, we all know that there's always some things that you have to address when you're working with female athletes. But from a training standpoint, I think any time that you can make sure that it's a level that we're gonna make sure that we're pushing our athletes and our expectations are high for those athletes regardless, I think it's important. So really getting to sometimes those female sport coaches, the same thing we've been fighting as strength coaches for seems like decades now. Are my athletes going to be big and bulky? Why do they need to strength train? And again, you have to fight that dinosaur mentality, and education is one of your jobs, and even if it's education with your colleagues. So injury concerns, obviously, why you're doing. The biggest reason, performance enhancement and injury reduction are the two biggest goals, and are one and the same. You know that. Some sport coaches equate injury to lifting weights could actually increase their chance of getting injured, whether it be in the weight room or in the long run. So, and again, I've run into the situation where you try to push the envelope when it comes to strength training, and those athletes are so detrained that they never really can catch up, and all of a sudden that can lead to a little more fatigue on the field. So you have to be careful with that. But again, it comes back to you have to be educated, and you have to be passionate, and make sure that the sport coach knows. Again, long, slow distance training. That's the thing. How many coaches still do a mile test? With all the research and all the things that you can get a better sport-specific energy system test, you still have multiple mile tests that coaches want to do, and I think it really comes down to you again continue to educate. That's why it's important, because the more coaches you talk to, the more ammo you have. Knowledge, when you get from other strength coaches, is what you use to help advocate for your athletes to your sport coaches. As crazy as that sounds. Go to conferences so you have ammo, so you can advocate for your student athletes in spite of what your sport coach wants you to do with them. Crazy concept, but that's really where we're at right now. Fads and outside influences, in the absence of evidence, those all kind of run together. Again, the outside influences, this school won the national championship, we're going to do what they do. I did this when I was in college 20 years ago, we're still going to, and it worked then, it's going to work now. Those are the battles you have to fight. Those are the things that you have to continue to educate coaches on. This is why they do it. They're not in the same situation as us, coach. Or, when you're able to network with as much people, it was always nice, because I wasn't the best strength coach, but I was at least would be able to talk to as many coaches as I could. And the best thing I could ever do was say, well, no, coach, I just talked to so-and-so. This is what they do. Here's so-and-so's program. And it's just amazing where some of those misconceptions happen. And that just comes back to networking. So, okay, so some of the frustration, I'll list a couple frustrations here. I think I have about 5 or so. How strength coaches get frustrated with sport coaches. And we'll go through this. So one of the frustrations is using their program, right? It doesn't happen so much at the bigger schools, but at the smaller schools, believe me, it happens. Here's the program we've used. This is what we're doing. Gotcha. Okay. So a couple of things that will help you is, again, ask those questions. And again, it depends how you ask those questions, how you bring this up to the sport coach. So again, here's a couple of things I like to do is ask them where they get it, right? And they'll tell you, right? It's from some other school where their buddy drew it up, or they got it from a website or whatever. How long have they used it? Why do they like it, right? How long they used it? They might might not have used it before. Why do they like it? They probably won't be able to answer that. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. And again, how are they evaluated? So really, coach, has this given you results before? How do you know? Have you tested? Have you, has the injuries gone down? Whatever it may be. The point is with these 4 questions is that there's a very good chance that the coach might not know the answer to that. And it might not give you, it's not trying to be combative or confront the coach, but what it will do is in the long run, it'll give you more ammo and more of a level playing field to stand on when it comes back to let's reevaluate what we're doing. Here comes the year 2. You can go back to those questions and now you can really make some differences because, and again, regardless, if they're determined that's the program you're doing, then you have to do your best to make it your own, right? Redo the program into your Excel sheet, and all of a sudden now again, if you're somebody that, and again, they might have a program, I've seen this before, and this is, it'd be crazy if I told you all the stories that I've heard and that I've went through, but, sometimes we've had coaches that, hey, we want to do this machine. Like, coach, we don't even have that machine. We want to be, we use nothing but, nothing but we need to be doing Olympic lifts. And at the time, I didn't have any bumpers. We need to, kettlebells are a thing now. It's like, okay, well, got to buy me some kettlebells then, coach. They might not even know that stuff. So again, you are the one that has to make it. If they're set on that program, make it your own, right? And again, I have a coach that wanted to do circuit training late in the season. Right when they got out to conferences internationally, they wanted to do circuits. So we did circuits. We did sets of 3 with a lot more rest in with that circuit. And it became a complex instead of a circuit. Tried to make it my own because I knew it was best for the athletes and still tried to make sure that I was adhering to what the coach wanted. So make that program your own and just make sure that you get as much information as you can because it will help you in the long run as much as that other coach. All right, schedule changes. This happens. And again, we talk about adaptability. It's the number one thing that I think helped me out more than anything is to learn to be adaptable, that there's so many more ways that you can do things. And so constant feedback from coaches and athletes, that's going to help you out a lot. Really just make sure that there's so many times that I knew that the lifting session was either canceled, added, or the time was changed through an athlete in passing. So having that relationship with those athletes sometimes is very important. Over communicate, make sure that, to me, I would try to stop in and see a sport coach every single day if I could. I'll be honest, I didn't, but that was one of the intentions. And every day I didn't, I felt bad, and I wanted to be able to talk to every coach, say, Coach, we good for today. 6:15, looking good, how you doing? And again, spark up that conversation. That goes back to the relationship you're trying to have with them anyway. So again, because now all of a sudden, at least you know those changes ahead of time. Adjust on the fly, that's easy. I mean, you should be able to. That's why a lot of the workout sheets we'd use a lot with, bolded, bulleted, italicized, just parentheses, just any kind of thing we could do is say, okay, if we cancel lifting 2 days out from a game and we're going to do the day before a game, now we can use that same workout, so I don't have to print out a whole new workout sheet or revamp the whole program, but now I could adapt with just that particular program. Hey, listen, replace this with this, you're only doing these many sets here, and let's go ahead and drop 10% with this percentage, or add whatever it may be, however you need to adapt it. But again, that's really important to make sure that you're not driving yourself bonkers by making all these last-minute changes. Make sure that you have the program itself set up that it's adaptable enough that you can make those changes without driving yourself crazy. And again, when in doubt, like I said, do the essentials first. When in doubt, get the athlete stronger. Don't worry about the specifics of movement pattern. Just get them. It's something I heard from Jim Windler. At the end of the day, if you have athletes that can squat very well and they can jump pretty well and they can press pretty well and just do the basic movements, they're going to be okay. And when in doubt, get them basically moving at a full range of motion in a smart, low volume, high intensity type program, and that's going to carry over. And again, I'd rather err on the side of undertraining than overtraining, trying to get too cute. So next thing is going to be deleting exercises, and I think that's one thing that really, comes to a coach doesn't want to do this exercise. I've had coach doesn't want to do Olympic lifts. Coach doesn't want to do. They don't want to squat. They don't want to whatever. You heard it. People are afraid of certain exercises, and where they should be afraid of certain coaches. But regardless, here's one thing. Make sure a couple things before you go crazy about. Listen, we have to do this. Like if a coach told me, listen, I don't want any kind of squat whatsoever. That would be the hardest thing for me. But I've been in a situation where I've had a coach that did not want to do box jumps. All right, we'll just jump in place. Or once we got the soft foam boxes, she, still didn't want him to jump because she thought they'd get hurt jumping. And no matter what kind of research I had with how the landing mechanics was associated with ACL injury, all that, it didn't matter. She did not want them jumping on anything. So we just jumped in place, which is probably more impact and whatever, but we got a training effect and that was fine. Make sure that you can justify it. Make sure you have every reason to say, listen, coach, we have to do this because of this. And again, I think it's one of those battles. Just be real careful what battles you have to choose. Because again, if something does go wrong, someone is sore, someone does get hurt, whatever, now you have that thing where a coach said, I told you not, I didn't want that in there. So that's important. Do you have enough evidence to support it? It's the same thing with, that's why as much data you can get with, the reason why our athletes squat below parallel or right, for us it was right at parallel. It was just, we had that ammo so we can go back and just say, listen, this is why we're doing, this is why we're going to justify it. And again, is there a suitable alternative? And again, if you have a coach that does not want to do Olympic lifts, can you find other ways to develop explosive power? And if the answer is no, then I don't know, you're not a very good coach, I guess. You have to be able to find, I was in a situation where I went from going from West Side barbell and mixed in with Olympic lifts, I didn't know what I was doing, to I went to the high intensity capital of the world. And I had some coaches call me out and say, okay, why are you doing this? And first of all, I couldn't answer it, which meant I wasn't a very good coach. But second of all, the fact that I couldn't answer it meant I better rethink of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I think you want to bank on, if I have to go somewhere and I have nothing but machines, I can get athletes stronger. If I go to a facility I have nothing but platforms and bumpers, I can get athletes stronger. If I have, if I have everything I need, I have the bands and chains that I want, all those things, I can get athletes stronger, and that's really what you have to be able to do. If your program is set, and your philosophy, your principles are set on one specific movement, then again, I think you need to expand your knowledge base. So that's just my opinion. All right, frustrated. Adding exercises. So, and again, they want you, this is when the sport coach wants you to add it. So this happens a lot of times too. Most times they don't know why they want you to add it. They just want you to add it. So I think you have to make sure, again, is it dangerous? Is it a dangerous movement? Is it going to put your athletes at danger? That's the number one thing. And then again, if it does, obviously you need to be able to address that, and then that's where the conversation gets a little tricky. Can the exercise be implemented? That's the other thing too. I want our athletes to be able to do this, this, and this. Well, I talked about it before, Coach. We don't have that equipment, or we don't have the time to do that. We wanted a coach that wanted to, basically that old test where we're going to measure the first 40, the second 40, the third 40 of a 120, and to be able to determine whether the athlete needed what kind of speed component they would need. And we just didn't have the technology really to do that accurately. And it's one of those things where it just, if you can't implement it, you can't do it because of time, space, whatever. That's the one thing. That's a logistical fight now. Now you're going to say, listen, Coach, we just don't have that. The whole thing with athletes wanted to use, and this is nothing against the piece of equipment, but Vertimax is one of those things. Like, Coach, are you paying for it? And can I store it in your office? Because I don't have the room for some of these things. So it's one of those things that's what you have to communicate. But then that's not because you don't like the exercise. But is it safe, and can I implement it? Don't make emotions are not part of it. Again, if you don't have a choice with it, I had a coach that again wanted us to do depth jumps, high depth jumps, regardless of body weight. He wanted high volume on it, right? Most coaches say, the only thing I can do was I coached them on technique, on landing, was able to progress, tried to get them on lower boxes, tried to get them, to basically educate the other coaches on, listen, look at how this athlete is landing. We need to go on a lower box because of this, this, and this. If not, you just got to continue to roll with it, or you have to be able to, stand for, what you believe in. If you really think you're going to have an athlete hurt, then that's a conversation you have to have. You always have to weigh what's right with my feeding my family. Sometimes that's a question that you have to ask in strength and conditioning. It's a shame it does, but sometimes that comes up. All right, so testing. This is another frustration. I think it's the last one. What do they want? I had an athlete. I spent a lot of time on developing a profile with looking at different things, the 10, the 40, the 5, 10, 5, the 3-cone drill, because to see if there's a difference and a correlation between the vertical jump, the standing broad jump, and all the weight room exercise. We give the coaches this data, and okay, and you care. You give an athlete their 40 times. When you test them, you spend a whole day testing, and you spend a whole training day testing, and you give them. And the coach already knew who the fastest athletes were anyway. So we said, all right, listen, we're just going to make them race and say, listen, here's your fastest kid. You don't care about the times anyway. And depending on the school you're at, you have such a small window. You have like a 6, 7 week, 8 week period. Then you have like 6, 7, 8 weeks where you're not doing that specific training. Then you have some time off. And by the time you test them a year later, those fitness qualities, have adapted or changed, maybe not based on the training or in spite of the training. So it really is one of those things. Make sure that the coach really wants that testing. What do the numbers mean? We talked about that. When will they need the data? That's the other thing too. Some coaches, I've had coaches that, listen, we have one group testing. I want to see the first group that just got finished. I want those numbers during the second group's testing period. I've been in that situation. I have some coaches that, and again, that's your job, is to get that coach that information. So make sure you're doing that in a timely manner, whatever they want. I wouldn't give them anything more than what they asked for, but whatever you feel will help that coach have a better insight on how the athlete is performing, number one, and two, how your program is helping those athletes. That's the other thing about testing. It's the one thing that you can do besides track and swimming. It's one of the only objective data pieces that you'll have for that sport, because the numbers don't lie. So that's a way for you to advocate for your own program as well by getting them the data. And again, is there alternatives to test? We talked about that. Last man standing. I mean, you could do a bunch of different different drills. Going old school and having two athletes race is just probably one of the best things that we implemented last year. I just wish I would have figured it out beforehand. So, questions on this? Again, will you be holding hands, skipping around campus with your sport coaches after this? Will all your parents that come to your facility give you rave reviews on Facebook? I don't know. I just know that, again, sometimes the biggest culprits for us as coaches that get in the way is ourselves and is our own ego. So understanding where the sport coach is coming from, understanding what they have invested, what they have to lose, and your role and how you can facilitate success for those athletes and for that team is important. Understanding the roles is one thing I learned, that for a sport coach, the head football coach has to worry about the program first, then the team. And if that's important, that there's a difference. The program, the team, then the athlete. As a strength coach or an athletic trainer, you have to be the opposite. It has to be the athlete, then the team, then the program. And I think that's the one thing that sometimes that is the relationship that gets in the way sometimes with the strength coach and sport coach. Make sure you visit elitefts.com, and make sure, again, if you have any other ideas that have helped you as a coach, please make sure you add those on, because it's very important that we continue this conversation. And the whole reason for this is to make sure that we have some dialogue that will help other coaches that have to deal with the same thing. Sometimes I get some feedback with, the most important thing we're coaching is, you just have to develop a good relationship. You have to be a nice guy and spend time with the sport coaches, or you have to really care about the athletes. Like, I know that. Everybody knows that. If you don't have that desire to help athletes, and if you're someone that doesn't want to get along with anybody, then why are you coaching? But is there specific strategies that have helped you facilitate a better relationship with those sport coaches that benefited your athletes and their training? That's the kind of dialogue that we want, and that's what's going to help us as coaches move on. So, again, tune in to elitefts.com, and we'll see you next time.